Hello, my lovelies. Today we're continuing our talk about parenting by personality. And this week we're talking about the inspired or dramatic child. This is the child that has no problem showing emotion of any kind, which can be quite the challenge for some parenting types. The good news is that we're going to dive in with an expert because guess who has that personality type? Yup, me, and a few others I know too. Before we dive in, though, I want to make clear that what I'm about to share are my personal experiences from my life and what I learned along the way. Your situation may be different, and this is no substitute for medical or mental health intervention, especially if your situation warrants it. This podcast series is designed to help parents understand themselves and their children better based on their personalities. It is not intended to diagnose or treat any mental or physical condition. If you suspect that you or a family member is at risk of physical or mental harm, please seek proper medical help immediately. Now, for those who are new to the podcast, when I talk about personalities, communication, and relationships, I use the DISC personality model of behavior and refer to people as D or driven, I or inspired, S or supportive, and C or cautious. You can find links to take your own personality assessment in the show notes. Now, let's talk about the dramatic inspired child. I can guarantee that you've seen an inspired child because they make sure that you see them. They're the toddlers that have no problem smiling and waving at strangers, and they may be the child that their parents say never met a stranger. On the flip side, they're the ones who, especially when tired, will fall out and may have a full-blown tantrum. And if parents don't have those types of big emotions themselves, they may struggle to deal with those children without causing emotional damage because those parents who don't have big emotions are sometimes embarrassed and humiliated when their children do. Inspired and dramatic children, they need connection, they need affirmation, and they need fun. And believe it or not, when they're having those meltdowns, they're seeking that connection. Or they're upset because they feel like they're losing that connection and they're really not trying to defy you. They're the personality that responds best to the carrot rather than the stick. And they will go the extra mile for people they care about. They're emotional and communicative, and while they can wear out some of the other personalities with their emotions and chatter, when in balance, they never intend to hurt anyone because they love people so much. In their younger years, these are the children who want to play all the time. In fact, their favorite phrase as a toddler might just be, "Play with me." And the more you can teach them through play, the better they're going to learn. Children also need big jobs to be broken down into bite-sized pieces because they can struggle with focus. The phrase, "clean up your room," might as well be the phrase, "get ready to go to Mars." Because without a plan that they can go through step by step, progress won't happen. I remember not being to ever keep my room clean as a child, even as a teenager. And while I know it was frustrating for my born organized mom, I truly couldn't motivate myself to clean my room because I had no idea where to start or how to organize my belongings. It's just something that doesn't come naturally to the inspired child. As a teen, my car was even worse. And it wasn't until I had children that I got good at cleaning my car on a regular basis because I used their sports practices and music lesson time to pick up trash, vacuum, clean the windows, and I used to keep all the supplies I needed to do that in the car at all times. The best part of that for me was I wasn't cleaning out the car for hours at a time. Instead, it was 30 minutes max, and I didn't have to be finished or it didn't have to be perfect. I only had to make progress. One week, I might pick up the trash and organize the back of my van. The next week, I might wash the windows, clean the dash or the door handles, or vacuum. Whatever seemed the most doable was the thing that I did, and it worked like a charm. I actually missed when those practices were over. Finally, the I child needs praise. And yes, all children need praise, but the inspired child needs it more than others. And when they get that from people they admire and love, it's life giving in a much bigger way than it is for other personality types. For them, it reminds me of when Sally Field accepted her second Oscar, and she was so excited that other people liked her. I've dropped the link for that in the show notes if you're interested in watching her, because her actual speech starts at 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and you can see the joy in her face when she says that. In addition to organization, one of the things that inspired children struggle with is isolation. So sending an I personality child to their room is almost cruel, unless there are toys or something that the child likes to play with. So in either case, the point you're trying to make will be lost because they'll either be fixated on being isolated or they're going to play with their toys. When I was young, I loved to read. So when my mom sent me to my room, especially to clean it, I would shove the mess in drawers or under the bed, and then I would read. I didn't do it to be defiant. I did it to get the mess out of my sight as quickly as possible so I could feel less isolated by reading and connecting with the characters in the book. Dramatic inspired children are much better taught in conversation. And please don't expect them to just understand what you've just told them to do before. They need reminders and reinforcement over and over again. Remember the praise that I talked about? Here's where you can catapult your inspired child to great success. Praise them and teach them to praise and feel confident about themselves because they are susceptible to the influence of others, especially their peers, because they trust that everyone has the love of other people that they have. And it can cause them great heartache if they lack a deep belief in themselves. If you want to talk more about that, I suggest scheduling a free discovery call, and we can really dive deeper into that if you have an inspired child. Rules are another thing that the inspired dramatic child struggles with. And if they have to guess at what they're doing wrong when people think they should just know, it's going to be an exercise in frustration for everyone. Inspired children, and adults for that matter, are not detail-oriented. So expecting them to be, again, is an exercise in frustration. They will ask for clarification if they need it. But if the answer is, you already know, or you should know, I assure you that they don't or they wouldn't ask. If you want them to remember something, find out how they learn best and use that to reinforce what you want them to learn. Be creative with it, and they will remember much better than merely being told one time. I used to make up songs, create posters and charts with my kids, and all kinds of things like that to help them learn the way they needed to learn. The strength of the inspired dramatic child and adult is seeing the big picture and using their imagination to create better worlds and creative projects that others can merely marvel at. Without the help of people who excel at details, though, those dreams can wither and die. Walt Disney, for sure, had some I in his personality. He had ideas that were thought to be impossible at the time. But when he envisioned them, he got the help of countless engineers and other technical people, and he turned a swamp into the happiest place on earth. It wasn't easy by a long shot, and there are an incredible number of impossible things that those teams made and continue to make possible. That's the kind of vision an I adult can have when their strengths are nurtured, as opposed to making them focus on details that kill their creative spirit. On the difference between boy and girl I personalities, this can get interesting because just as when a girl is ridiculed for showing D personality traits, boys are often maligned when they show I and S personality traits. Again, this is changing with men being more comfortable with showing emotion. And people like Andrew Garfield, Stephen Colbert, and Anderson Cooper talking about their mothers passing away and shedding a few tears show that that's actually happening, which may be why the men we saw in the past with big emotional personalities often ended up in professions like acting, music, and coaching, where their boldness and emotion are welcomed rather than ridiculed. And while women end up in those same professions, they have in the past had more options. Dramatic women are also welcomed in the professions of teaching, retail, in home parties, childcare, and more. And, I had an English teacher once that read Shakespeare to us in her lovely Alabama accent. And she had us act out Romeo and Juliet in class. And I can still see her perched on her chair in that classroom, making Shakespeare come alive for me. She's the reason I became an English major. And she inspired me to go to the college that I chose to attend. That's how powerful an inspired, dramatic person can be. Hopefully, it gets easier and easier for all of us to be exactly who we are, whatever our personality. And that's part of why I do what I do. You see, the thing that used to bother me most about how other people related to my personality is that some people thought because I wasn't organized or detail oriented, that I wasn't smart, which isn't true at all. I know because I was tested. That's a Big Bang reference for those of you who don't know the show. The thing is that I can be detail oriented if I have to, like when I'm planning a trip, but it takes a huge amount of energy and focus to do that, just like it takes a driven person a lot of energy and self-control to deal with an emotional toddler. So let's talk about how different personalities might deal with their inspired, dramatic child better. First, we're going to talk about a driven parent with an inspired child. In balance, this is a great duo. If the driven parent understands that a friendly approach and allowing for the inspired, dramatic child's enthusiasm and stories to be part of the process is important. Fortunately, both of these personalities are outgoing and have a faster pace. So the driven parent can motivate the inspired, dramatic child in several ways. One of the things is, say a child wants to tell you a story. You can make a game out of doing a task. So let's say that the child needs to pick up their toys. You can make it a race to pick things up, or you can have them pick up a certain number of toys by the time you count to a certain number, and then they can tell you the story, or show you the trick that they want to do, or have you teach them something that they want to learn how to do. And if you can't think of something to teach them, I promise they will. I've talked to many driven parents, and one of the ways I show them that they can help their child learn from the know, like, and trust paradigm that we use in business, because it applies differently to the D and I personalities, not only in business, but in life. For driven people, they often have to trust you first before they like you. And it doesn't matter how long you've known each other if they trust you. And if they trust you, they don't even necessarily need to like you to do business with you. For the inspired personality, they like everyone until someone gives them a reason to dislike them. And even then, they may forgive more times than is healthy for them because they truly want to see the good in people and like them and be likable at the same time. That may seem like an insurmountable task, because I remember my mom telling me as an I child that I cared too much what people thought of me. At the same time, I was shocked at how she could end friendships and stop talking to people without ever giving that person another thought. What I know as an adult is that without a huge amount of praise and affirmation from a parent and or important people in an inspired, dramatic child's life, they're going to look outside themselves forever for that validation. If they're lucky, they're going to find teachers, coaches, and other adults that are going to pour into them and show them how to love themselves, to like themselves, to be strong within themselves. If they're unlucky, they fall prey to people who manipulate them to think that they're worthless without that person's approval. And it can be very damaging. What I also know is that many of the driven parents that I know and that I've coached have an amazing sense of self. And although much of theirs is natural, when it comes to their children, they can affirm those children to feel amazing about themselves. And when their child is struggling, if they're willing to listen, they can figure out how to overcome that if they're willing to focus on the child and how they feel about themselves rather than how they should feel about other people or the challenging situations they may find themselves in. This is how you turn an unsure child who truly wants everyone to like them into a strong person who is resistant to people who want to tear them down and can be very successful because they have a strong inner love and respect for themselves. For the supportive parent, you love to nurture, and your inspired dramatic child loves to be nurtured and adored. You can also be the person that supports your child with co-working and body doubling and being the most patient of listeners to their many stories. You love to pour into people, and when you do that, you fill your inspired dramatic child's cup in a beautiful way. Your challenge with your child is not letting them run all over you, which they will if they don't have boundaries. They don't mean to do that because they love you, but because they have such high creative energy, you can get so exhausted that you just let them run the show. And while they might like that, they need your guidance to keep them from becoming insufferable. You can teach them kindly to take turns in games and life, as well as talking. I remember once saying to my child with the friendliest tone I could find that he was talking merely to hear himself talk. And I didn't think he really cared if I was listening. I know that may sound harsh to a supportive parent, but when he thought about it for a minute, he agreed. He was talking just to talk and expend some energy. So we decided that he could keep talking, but I was going to make dinner. And if he wanted a response to something, he was going to tell me before he told me the story that he wanted me to respond to. That way I could listen more carefully. And it turned out to actually be a lovely time for both of us. There are still days when he's telling me a story that I'll stop him and ask if he's telling me something to share information or because he wants a response. And if it's the former, I start doing mindless things like putting dishes away where I can work on something I want to accomplish while he shares his story. I love supporting him that way, and he knows that he's supporting me at the same time. Now, moving on to the cautious personality parenting the inspired dramatic child, I won't lie. This one can be a challenge unless you understand some very important things about each other. Inspired dramatic children don't care about the details. They like coloring outside the lines, and they love making creative messes. For the cautious personality, that can look like defiance and flaunting the rules, even when it's not. Like with the D child, one of the greatest challenges of a C parent with an inspired child is rules. And if this child does not like your rules, they will let you and everyone who will listen know about it. This is where the cautious parent will benefit from showing, not just telling the inspired dramatic child that they can benefit from the rules, or they're going to resist them at every turn. And even when they do comply, they're going to do it begrudgingly and may defy them as soon as you're out of sight. The key to overcoming the challenge of the rules is to make them make sense to the inspired dramatic child. In our house growing up, we had a bedtime and a lights out time. We were expected to be in bed at a certain time. We could listen to the radio or read for a set time after we were in bed to help get us calmed down for the night. While I didn't love having a bedtime, knowing I could read, which I love to do, made it so much easier to get myself to bed on time. I've often talked about my sister-in-law who has a large amount of C in her personality mix versus my inspired personality. And I think one of the conclusions we came to about our friendship can be incredibly powerful when it comes to the cautious parents and inspired children. One day, my sister-in-law asked me how we stayed friends when we were so different. And I said, I thought it was because I lift her up and she keeps me grounded. You see, the inspired dramatic child is naturally optimistic, believes the best of people, and lives for fun. When things go badly or the I child fails at something, they can spiral because they can turn that challenge into a very personal issue. A cautious parent always thinks of all the ways that things can go sideways. And as long as they don't try to manipulate the inspired child to stop taking chances, the two of them can look at every, and I put this in air quotes, failure, and work out a way that things can go better next time. This was a really cool thing to see with our youngest when he was working on his senior thesis project for college. His initial feedback was not positive. And when our son told us what his professor said, we knew he must have misunderstood something that was said long before his initial critique. Fortunately, there was time to fix it. And my son and my husband hammered that plan out because this mama was not equipped to help him with the planning of what he was trying to convey. Because my cautious husband could drill down the details of our son's project, it ended up looking amazing when it was pinned up at the gallery where he and his classmates displayed their projects. Was it the best looking one there? Nope. But it held its own with almost all of the other projects, and her son was very proud of what he submitted, and that's what mattered most. We are definitely going to keep talking about the complexity of how adult and child personality profiles interact and mix, because when you figure this out, your relationship with your child can be better than you ever imagined. You learn to appreciate one another when you're at your best, and to deal with each other and stay connected and respectful even when you're stressed. Who doesn't want that as a parent? That's why I suggest that everyone get a personality assessment. There are multiple versions of assessments for adults, children, and teens, and if that sounds like a lot, it can be overwhelming, which is why I would suggest that you book a free 15-minute discovery call so we can figure out what would be the best plan for you moving forward. You may have a question that we can solve in that 15-minute conversation. We might schedule something more, but I assure you that whatever we chat about, you'll have some next steps to improve your relationship with your inspired dramatic child, no matter what age they are. So go to the Moving Toward Better homepage and sign up for your discovery call today, and let's chat soon. As always, if you like what you've heard, please share and subscribe. Until next time, keep moving toward better, whatever that looks like for you. Love you all. At Moving Toward Better, it's our mission to help you unlock a fantastic life, powered by what's unique and authentically you. To learn how we can help you in your quest, head over to movingtowardbetter.com to check it out, or use the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening, thanks for being you, and have a great day. Love you all.